Here's an expanded version of scene 1 to about 1,000 words. The rain had started softly, a gentle patter on the black umbrellas of mourners gathered in the small cemetery on the outskirts of town. But now it had grown heavier, streaking down in relentless sheets, soaking coats and making the air smell faintly of wet earth and fallen leaves. Daniel Carter tightened the collar of his coat around his neck and glanced down at his daughter, Lily, who clutched his hand with a grip both tender and tentative. She was only 10, too young to understand death fully, yet old enough to sense its weight. Her eyes, wide and curious, darted from the black-clad mourners to the freshly turned grave, as if she were searching for some hidden explanation in the damp soil. "Daddy, why are people crying so much?" Lily asked, her voice small, almost lost in the drizzle. Daniel knelt beside her, brushing a strand of wet hair from her forehead. He forced a smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his tired eyes. "They're sad because they miss someone they loved, Pumpkin," he said gently. "It's okay to cry when you miss someone. It's normal." Lily nodded slowly, pressing her hand against his. "I guess, I'm glad we still have each other." Daniel felt a pang of bittersweet warmth. He had raised her alone for 10 years, learning every day how to balance work, bills, and her happiness, often sacrificing his own comfort. And yet, moments like this, watching her small face pressed into his coat, made every struggle feel worth it. As they stood quietly, Daniel's attention shifted to a figure a few feet away. She was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, dressed in a black coat that did little to hide the swell of her belly. She clutched it with one hand while the other pressed against her forehead, her shoulders trembling as if trying to hold herself upright against the weight of the world. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mingling with the rain, and Daniel could see the raw strain in her eyes, the exhaustion, the fear, the grief that had nothing to do with the ceremony itself. He approached her carefully, his voice gentle but steady. "Are you all right?" She looked up, startled, her eyes wide and panicked. I don't think so," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I'm pregnant, and I can't seem to catch my breath sometimes, and I don't know anyone here. I feel lost." Daniel's instincts kicked in immediately. He couldn't just stand by. His own experiences as a single parent had taught him that fear and vulnerability were best met with calm and steady hands. "Here," he said softly. "Come with me, let's sit for a moment." He gestured to a nearby bench, its wood slick with rain, and waited for her to move. She hesitated, her body rigid with anxiety, but eventually sank onto the seat, her hands resting lightly on her stomach as if holding herself together physically and emotionally at the same time. Daniel knelt beside her, taking off his scarf and draping it gently over her shoulders. "You'll be okay," he said, his voice calm and unwavering. "Just take a few deep breaths. Don't worry about anything else right now." She exhaled shakily, letting the warmth of the scarf seep into her damp coat. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. I don't know anyone here, and you just helped me." Daniel smiled faintly, his own exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Sometimes, all anyone needs is a little help," he said. "My name's Daniel, and this is my daughter, Lily." He nodded toward her, and Lily waved shyly, her face serious but intrigued by the newcomer. "I'm Mia," the woman replied, offering a weak smile. It was brief, but it carried a flicker of relief, as if someone had finally acknowledged her. Struggle without judgment. Daniel glanced at Lily, who was now crouched down to Mia's level, her small hand reaching out tentatively. "Hi," Lily said softly. "Do you want to sit with us for a while?" Mia hesitated, her lips trembling. Then she nodded, leaning slightly toward the child as though even this small gesture of kindness was a balm to her nerves. Daniel watched them for a moment, his heart swelling with a quiet admiration. Here was a stranger, overwhelmed and frightened, finding comfort in the simple presence of another human being. And Lily, innocent and intuitive, had reached out without hesitation, bridging the gap that fear had created. For the next several minutes, Daniel focused solely on her. He asked if she needed water, made sure she could breathe comfortably, and spoke in a steady, reassuring tone. Around them, the funeral continued, the sound of muted sobs and the occasional whispered condolence a distant hum. But for this small trio, time seemed to slow. The world narrowed to a shared space of care, attention, and fragile hope. "You're really kind," Mia said after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper, yet imbued with gratitude that reached deep into Daniel's chest. I don't know why you'd help me like this. You barely know me." Daniel shook his head gently. "Because sometimes, that's all anyone needs." Just someone who cares, even for a moment. That's enough. Mia looked at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, and for the first time in the day, Daniel saw a spark of peace in her expression. Thank you, she repeated, this time with more conviction. Lily tugged at his sleeve, her small hand brushing against his coat. Daddy, can we make sure she gets home safe? She asked, her voice filled with the same kind of innate compassion that made Daniel proud every day. Of course, he replied, standing and offering Mia his arm for support. Together, they guided her slowly through the rain-soaked cemetery and toward the parking lot. Daniel kept a careful eye on her, his other hand firmly holding Lily's. The wet asphalt reflected the gray sky, but their small act of kindness felt like a ripple of light against the somber day. Before she left, Mia handed them a slip of paper with her number scrawled hastily on it. Just in case, she said softly. I don't know what I would have done without you today. Daniel nodded. Take care of yourself. And remember, you're stronger than you think. He watched her drive away, the car's taillights fading into the misty gray. Lily turned to him, eyes wide. Daddy, do you think she'll be okay? He smiled, brushing the rain from her hair. Yes, Pumpkin, she'll be okay. We just had to be there when she needed someone. That's what matters. As they walked home through the rain, Daniel felt a quiet warmth settle in his chest. It wasn't just the satisfaction of helping someone, it was the reminder that small acts of compassion could carry immense power. In a world often weighed down by grief and hardship, offering care, presence, and empathy could create a lifeline, even if only for a moment. And that day, under gray skies and cold rain, Daniel realized that sometimes, the simplest gestures, holding a hand, offering a seat, sharing a coat, could change a life. If you want, I can also expand scene 2 to 1,000 words in a similarly detailed, cinematic style, showing his reaction to inheriting $10 billion and how it changes his world. Do you want me to do that next? Here's an expanded version of scene 2 to roughly 1,000 words. When Daniel and Lily finally reached their modest apartment, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving everything damp and glistening. Daniel hung up their wet coats, the familiar routine of homecoming bringing a comforting sense of normalcy. After the chaos of the funeral, Lily, still holding onto her stuffed rabbit, padded over to the couch, her damp shoes squeaking softly against the floor. Daniel sank into the chair nearby, pulling off his shoes and running a hand through his damp hair, mentally replaying the morning's events. The memory of Mia's anxious eyes and her tremble as he helped her to the bench lingered in his mind, a reminder that some moments, however brief, could feel profoundly meaningful. His phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. Daniel frowned. Who could this be? He muttered to himself. He picked up and answered, expecting perhaps a wrong number or a telemarketer. Mr. Carter, a calm, professional voice said. This is Elaine Morris from Hamilton and Pierce Law Firm. I'm calling regarding a matter of inheritance. Could you come to our office today? Daniel blinked, unsure he'd heard correctly. Inheritance? He asked cautiously. I think there's some kind of mistake. I don't know anyone who left me anything. The lawyer's tone was patient but unwavering. Mr. Carter, the documents are clear. You are listed in the will of the late Richard Halloway, a billionaire entrepreneur and philanthropist. The estate is substantial, and you are the sole beneficiary. I realize this may seem improbable, but the inheritance is confirmed and legally binding. Daniel felt a strange heat rise in his chest. He laughed nervously, shaking his head as if to dislodge the confusion. You've got the wrong person, he said, voice tight with disbelief. I'm just a single dad. I work hard, I pay my bills. I've never met this Mr. Halloway. Perhaps not personally, sir, the lawyer replied. But the will is explicit. You are to inherit his entire estate, which, to be precise, is valued at approximately $10 billion. I understand this is shocking, but it is true. We can discuss the details in our office if you are able to come in today. Daniel sank into the chair, gripping the phone tightly. $10 billion. The number was incomprehensible. He repeated it in his mind over and over, trying to attach some tangible meaning to it. 10 billion. Bills, rent, groceries, Lily's school supplies, these worries would vanish in an instant. Yet the sheer magnitude of it all made his head spin. He glanced over at Lily, who was sitting cross-legged on the couch, pretending to read a picture book but clearly sensing something extraordinary in the air. Her small face looked up at him. Daddy, are you okay? She asked softly, her tone cautious yet curious. Daniel forced a smile, though it felt fragile. Yes, Pumpkin, I think we just found out something incredible. He didn't want to explain the full scale of it yet. She was 10, and the concept of billions of dollars was meaningless to her. But he wanted her to share in the wonder, even in its abstract form. By the time he arrived at Hamilton and Pierce Law Firm, the world outside seemed unchanged. Cars drove past, pedestrians hustled under umbrellas, and the city carried on as if nothing extraordinary had just touched his life. Inside the sleek, minimalist office, Daniel met Elaine Morris, the lawyer, who ushered him into a quiet conference room. A stack of documents sat neatly on the table, their crisp edges symbolizing a reality that felt almost surreal. We'll go through the documents together, Elaine said, taking a seat across from him. I assure you, Mr. Carter, everything is in order. Mr. Holloway's estate is vast, and you are the only beneficiary. This includes real estate, investments, private holdings, and a significant portfolio of philanthropic funds. Daniel's hands shook as he took the first page, scanning the name Richard Holloway and the legal language that confirmed what he could barely believe. It was real. He had inherited $10 billion. It wasn't a lottery win or some abstract promise, it was legally binding, and it had happened to him, an ordinary man who had simply tried to do the right thing in life. As Elaine outlined the specifics, Daniel's mind wandered. He imagined the possibilities, the freedom, the chance to provide everything he had ever wanted for Lily, a home with space to run and play, education without worry, adventures he had never dared dream of. And yet, amid the overwhelming scale of wealth, a quiet thought lingered in his mind, the image of Mia, the pregnant woman he had helped earlier. That morning, he had been no one special, just a man extending kindness without expecting anything in return. When he stepped out of the law office an hour later, the sun had broken through the clouds, casting shafts of light on the wet streets. Daniel walked slowly, letting the reality sink in. $10 billion was a life-altering sum, enough to change everything he had ever known. But his first instinct wasn't to plan luxury or indulgence. Instead, he thought of responsibility. How could he use this to make the world better? How could he ensure that his daughter grew up with compassion and tact, not spoiled by wealth but strengthened by it? Back at home, he found Lily waiting, her face alight with curiosity and excitement. Daddy, did they tell you? She asked, bouncing slightly on the balls of her feet. He laughed softly, kneeling to her level. Yes, Pumpkin, we're rich now. Lily's eyes widened, sparkling with amazement. Rich, like a real billionaire. Yes, he admitted, hugging her tightly. But being rich isn't just about money. It's about what we do with it. We can help people, make lives better, just like we did for Mia today. Lily hugged him back fiercely, her small arms encircling his neck. Can we help lots of people, Daddy? Like heroes? Daniel smiled, brushing her hair from her eyes. Yes, Pumpkin, we can help a lot of people. And we'll do it together. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, Daniel felt the full weight of the day settle over him. A fortune had been placed in his hands, but it was more than wealth, it was opportunity. He thought of the funeral, of Mia, of the small acts of kindness that had defined him long before the inheritance. That same compassion, that willingness to care for someone without expectation, was what had guided him through life and would continue to guide him now. He sat in the quiet apartment, listening to the rain begin again against the window, and allowed himself to imagine the future. A life free from financial fear. The ability to provide for his daughter in ways he had only dreamed of. And the power to make a difference for people who needed help, just as he had helped a stranger on a rainy afternoon. Daniel realized, with a mixture of awe and humility, that wealth could never replace what truly mattered, kindness, empathy, and connection. But now, with $10 billion at his disposal, he could amplify it in ways he never thought possible. He looked at Lily, peacefully asleep, her small hand clutching her rabbit, and whispered, "We'll do good, Pumpkin. We'll do so much good." And for the first time in years, Daniel Carter allowed himself to feel something he hadn't in a long while, hope, unfiltered and boundless, stretching out into a future filled not just with fortune but with purpose. If you want, I can also create cinematic-style image prompts for both scenes, showing Daniel, Lily, and Mia at the funeral, and then Daniel discovering the inheritance in a visually dramatic way. Do you want me to do that?